together. This is not just a story about war. It is a story about unity, about power, about mistakes, about peace, and what happens when a leader walks away.
Wow, so this is the story of General Yakubu Gowon. Wait, oh, do you know that that child that is crying, that was crying at the carriage, do you know that that child is someone's grandfather now? Someone's grandfather. That child is someone's grandfather now. That was crying. I wonder if that man is still alive. I wonder if he comes across this, he'll be like telling his children, grandchildren, come and see me when I was small like you. The grandchildren will be like, Grandpa is crying. Grandpa was crying. Grandpa, I'm taller than you here. Grandpa is now small. Grandpa is tekreke. Woo! That's cool. That's cool. So this is the story of General Yakubu Gowon. So take your seatbelts, fasten your seatbelt as we'll be unleashing the historical story of General Yakubu Gowon, the former military president of Nigeria. Thank you.
From the throne with his dignity intact. This is the story of General Yakubu Gowon, the man who led Nigeria through civil war, declared no victor, no vanquished, and then chose the quiet road when others would have chosen to be loud forever. Grab your seats, because what you're about to hear isn't just about history. It is a story full of lessons. Born on October 19, 1934 in the small town of Lor, a small village within the Kanke local government area located in Plateau State, Nigeria, Gowon grew up in a Christian household as his father was a missionary with the Church Missionary Society, the CMS. Gowon made a bold move when he decided to join the military. At the time, Nigeria was still under British colonial rule, and the Nigerian military was largely commanded by British officers. He trained in Ghana at the Regular Officers Special Training School, and later in the United Kingdom, attending the prestigious Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in 1955 to 1956, where some of the world's finest officers are trained. He further honed his strategic mind at the Staff College in Camberley in 1962 and the Joint Staff College in Latima in 1965, gathering military knowledge that would later be crucial in navigating one of Nigeria's darkest hours. By the time Nigeria gained independence in 1960, Gowon was already a young officer climbing the ranks. He was smart, obedient, and loyal. He was a soldier's soldier. Crucially, he wasn't perceived as a political threat. That made him the kind of man others could trust, or at least tolerate, in the volatile world of military politics. Then came the first military coup in January 1966, led by Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeugu and other young military officers at the time. The coup saw the assassination of top political and military leaders, including Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, Ahmadu Bello, Premier of the North, Samuel Akintola, Premier of the West, and a host of senior military officers. This coup, perceived by many as ethnically skewed, violently destabilized the nascent young nation of Nigeria. The coup was bloody and controversial because many of the victims were from the north and most of the coup plotters were from the then eastern region. At this point, things were getting out of hand. There were violent reprisals against Igbos in the north, leading to thousands of deaths, and Nigeria began to really crack. In the ensuing chaos, General Aguiyi Ironsi, the most senior military officer in Nigeria at the time, who hailed from present-day Abia State, took power as Nigeria's first military head of state. But Ironsi's leadership was short-lived. Just 6 months later, on July 29, 1966, another military coup erupted, this time led by northern officers seeking revenge. Ironsi was overthrown and murdered, along with his host, Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Francis Fajuyi, at a place called Lalupon in Ibadan. Fajuyi was the governor of the Western region. Amid all the suspicion, betrayal, and bloodshed, a quiet young officer named Yakubu Gowon was chosen to take charge of the most populous country in Africa. He was just 31 years old at the time of the coup that brought him to power, turning 32 in October of that year. But why Gowon? This was the question many people asked, and the answer was simple. He was neutral, a Christian from a minority ethnic group, the Angas, in the middle belt of the north, not Igbo, not Yoruba, and not seen as power-hungry. He wasn't directly involved in either the January 1966 coup or the July counter-coup of the same year. And most importantly, the army leadership, particularly those from the north, believed he could hold Nigeria together or at least try. So, on August 1, 1966, Yakubu Gowon became Nigeria's new head of state. Just like that, a young man from the highlands of Plateau found himself sitting at the top of a fragile, angry, and bleeding nation. He did not ask for power, but power had chosen him. And what lay ahead would test him like nothing before. The road to unity would begin, but not without war and not without bloodletting. When Yakubu Gowon took power in August 1966, Nigeria was a ticking time bomb. Ethnic tensions were at an unprecedented high. Trust was low, and the military was deeply divided along tribal lines. The dream of a united Nigeria was slipping away and fast. The immediate challenge facing Gowon was how to keep Nigeria from breaking apart. But the damage was already severe. In May 1967, just months after Gowon's rise, the military governor of the Eastern region, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, announced the secession of the Eastern region from Nigeria, forming the independent state of Biafra. To Ojukwu and many Igbo people, it was a matter of survival. They had faced massacres in the north, with estimates of thousands killed in anti-Igbo pogroms in 1966, felt abandoned by the federal government, and believed that breaking away was their only hope for security and dignity. But to Gowon, and to many in the north and west, Biafra's secession was unacceptable. It meant the dissolution of Nigeria as a sovereign entity. It was in fact seen as an affront to the dignity and sovereignty of Nigeria. So he made a choice, a difficult, controversial, and painful one at that. Gowon declared war to, quote, keep Nigeria warm. What followed was one of Africa's most brutal civil wars. The Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Nigeria-Biafra War, lasted from July 6, 1967 to January 15, 1970. Over 3 years and 6 months, an estimated 3 million people, mostly civilians, lost their lives. A significant portion of these deaths, particularly in Biafra, were due to starvation and disease caused by the Nigerian government's total blockade of Biafra, both on land, by sea, and by air. Food was prohibited from entering the Biafran enclave from Nigeria. Images of malnourished Biafran children with bloated stomachs shook the world, transforming it into a global humanitarian disaster that spurred international relief efforts. Gowon faced heavy criticism, both locally and internationally, for the conduct of the war, particularly the blockade of Biafra. But he remained firm. In his eyes, letting Biafra go would set a dangerous precedent, that any group unhappy with the Federation could simply break away, copying from Biafra. He held firm to the idea of a united Nigeria, even if it meant war. To Gowon's credit, when the war ended in January 1970, he did not seek revenge. Instead, he famously declared a policy of, quote, no victor, no vanquished. He offered a general amnesty to Biafran soldiers and promised reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction, what he called the 3 R's. This was a remarkably magnanimous gesture, defying expectations of punitive measures. Despite this gesture, the post-war years were difficult. Rebuilding the East proved harder than expected. Promises of compensation did not always reach the people, and many former Biafrans were left impoverished, feeling excluded and angry. The wounds of war ran deep, and they still resonate. But Gowon pressed on. He tried to restore faith in the Nigerian project. He expanded education, notably establishing 7 new universities, including the University of Benin, and launched massive infrastructure programs. To further address ethnic tensions and decentralize power, he had created 12 new states from the original 4 regions in May 1967, shortly before the war, hoping to weaken ethnic power blocs and give minority groups more representation and a greater sense of belonging within the Federation of Nigeria. To fund these ambitions, Gowon relied on something Nigeria had in abundance: oil. The early 1970s saw an unprecedented oil boom driven by the 1973 Arab oil embargo, with Nigeria's oil revenue surging from 176.4 million naira in 1970 to 5.1 billion naira in 1974. For the first time, Nigeria had serious money, but with money came corruption, and with power came greed, setting the stage for challenges that would define Gowon's later years in power. Still, in the eyes of many Nigerians, Gowon remained a humble and sincere leader who guided the country through its darkest days. He never wore lavish uniforms, and he rarely raised his voice, but he held the country together by force, by faith, and by focus. The war had changed him. He entered as a young, uncertain soldier. He emerged as a leader burdened with both the heavy weight of the conflict and a profound sense of gratitude for its resolution. Yet, even peace would not protect him from the storm that was coming. After the Civil War ended in 1970, Nigeria entered a new era, an era filled with oil money, high hopes, and hidden dangers. Gowon stood tall at the center of it all. He was not just the head of state, but the man holding together a deeply wounded yet oil-rich nation. The end of the war had brought peace, but not without challenges. Nigeria's economy was booming thanks to the oil boom of the early 1970s, which saw the price of oil increase quadruple in a few short years. But while money flowed into government coffers, something else seeped into the system: corruption. Ministers, governors, and senior civil servants were getting rich fast. Contracts were inflated, public funds went unaccounted for, and a culture of chop and chop, steal and escape started to take roots. Rather than decisively tackling the corruption head-on, Gowon's administration often appeared to look the other way. Reports and rumors of embezzlement mounted, yet few were punished effectively. The very system he had helped stabilize after the war was now being eroded from the inside. Meanwhile, the young military officers who had once cheered Gowon's rise were growing relentless. They saw how the country's vast wealth was being squandered, how promises of reform were being broken, and how the momentum for progress had stalled. They believed Nigeria needed a fresh direction. One of the key turning points came when Gowon postponed the return to civilian rule. In a National Day broadcast on October 1, 1974, Gowon suddenly announced that the 1976 transition date to democracy would be delayed indefinitely. His reason: Nigeria wasn't ready for a return to politics, he said. The foundations weren't strong enough, he added. But many Nigerians, particularly the educated elite and the military, did not agree with him. They viewed it as a clear betrayal of trust and an attempt to perpetuate himself in power. The military was especially angry. They believed Gowon was now holding onto power for too long, that he was losing the zeal he once had, and that the fight for a united Nigeria was slowly turning into just another power game. So, on July 29, 1975, ironically the 9th anniversary of the counter-coup that brought him to power, Yakubu Gowon was overthrown in a bloodless military coup. Gowon was away in Kampala, Uganda, attending an Organization of African Unity summit when the coup was announced back home on Radio Nigeria. The announcement was made by his kinsman Joseph Garba, who also served as commander of the Guards Brigade at the time, the head of the President's security unit. Just like Gowon, Garba was from Plateau State. Just like that, the era of Gowon ended. There were no tanks on the streets, no gunshots in the capital, just a calm announcement and a quiet exit. Gowon did not resist. He did not return to Nigeria to fight for power. Instead, he remained in exile in the United Kingdom, where he enrolled at Warwick University to study political science. The man who once led Africa's most populous country now sat quietly in a classroom with young persons, taking notes, writing essays, presenting seminar papers, and reflecting on power. His fall wasn't violent, it wasn't dramatic, but it marked the end of an era, a period filled with hope, war, wealth, and missed opportunities. Yet, this would not be the last time Nigeria heard from Gowon. Following the brutal assassination of his successor, Murtala Mohammed, barely 200 days into power, Gowon was surprisingly accused of involvement in the coup. His rank and military benefit were thus stripped. However, the charges were never definitely proven, and years later in 1987, under the regime of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, the government restored his rank and honor, effectively granting him a full pardon for whatever must have been alleged against him. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Gowon re-emerged, not as a politician or a kingmaker, but as a moral voice in national affairs. He founded the Nigeria Praise Movement in 1996, believing that the nation's challenges required not just sound policies but also spiritual intervention and national repentance. He began speaking at conferences, writing about unity and counseling leaders both in government and out of government, advocating for peace and reconciliation. He never ran for political office again, never called for a return to military rule, and never actively sought the spotlight, preferring a more advisory and spiritual role. Today, Yakubu Gowon is one of the few Nigerian leaders still highly respected. His time in office wasn't perfect. The civil war, the perceived inaction on corruption scandals, the delayed return to democracy, all left real scars and continue to be debated by historians. But his conduct after power, the grace with which he exited the stage and dedicated himself to national healing, has earned him rare praise in a country where leaders often cling to power till the very end. He reminds many of what leadership could be: flawed, yes, but still human, still hopeful. In a country known for leaders who come, conquer, and often refuse to leave, Yakubu Gowon was different. He made heavy choices, some that scarred a nation. But unlike many, he also chose to live, to reflect, to grow. No stolen billions, no political comeback, just a man who led, stumbled, and still found the grace to walk again and pray for the country he once ruled. In the end, Gowon did not just fight to keep Nigeria together. He became a symbol of what Nigerian leadership could be if humility ever met power. The question now is, in today's Nigeria, would a leader like Yakubu Gowon ever stand a chance? History will surely serve as the decider. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I am your friend and host, Ekemi Nudim, wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you very much for watching this video. God bless you. And please, if you did not comment, please go and comment, like, and share this video. And don't forget to come back next time for more exciting stories, histories, folktales, memes, jokes, and comedy, including movies. Don't forget to come back to BKOO2 channel. So please don't forget to share with your friends. It's very important. Share with your friends, and I hope you all learned well. This is history. This is history. I hope you all learned well from this video. So as you watch finish, please endeavor to share, like, and comment. Don't forget, it's very, 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 very important. And we'll be expecting you to return back to BKOO2 channel for more videos. You get a point? Thank you. God bless you all. Bye.